Good morning, dear primary 6 students. We continue our explanation of the science curriculum for primary 6 for the first term. And in the last video we talked about how the cell is a system, and we got to know that the cell is the main building unit of all living organisms' body, and we also knew that living organisms can be divided into unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. So this is where we begin for today's lesson. We get to know that the cell has its own part inside of it, and that each part of those has its own function to do. Well, we know that each group of similar cells makes up tissues, and tissues make up organs, and then organs make up systems, and the systems make up a whole body. For example, any group of similar cells make up tissues, like that. The muscle cells, a group of muscle cells make muscle tissues, and those tissues make up organs, such as the stomach, it has muscles, the heart is a muscle, and then a group of organs make a system. For example, the stomach is part of the digestive system, and all the systems together make up a human body. And the human body has around 40 trillion cells, which is 40,000 billion cells, 40 million cells. So it's a huge number, of course. So now, let's talk about the animal cell. The animal cell has components inside of it. For example, it has the cell membrane. It has the cytoplasm, which is the liquid inside of the cell, where all other organelles float inside. It has the nucleus. It has many different organelles which we are going to talk about. But first, we need to know that there is a difference between the plant cell and the animal cell. For example, the plant cell is surrounded by a cell wall from outside. The animal cell is not. The cell wall is made up of something called cellulose, which is a kind of sugar which gives it the hard texture to give it a definite shape. A special type of plant cells has the ability to make photosynthesis process, which you have already learned in primary 5, as it contains a special organelle that's called chloroplasts. So, let's see. What is a thick liquid inside the cell? Well, is it the cellulose, cytoplasm, or similar cells? That's the cytoplasm. A group of what forms a tissue? Cellulose or similar cells? Well, it's similar cells. And of course, the cell wall is made up of a substance called cellulose. Good. And now, we are going to talk about the parts of the animal cell, which we have 6 main parts that we need to know. First, the cell membrane. The cell membrane, it's the outer lining of the cell, and it has 2 functions. First, it protects the cell like any other outer part, like a surrounding anything, it protects it. and it controls the substances that can enter or leave the cell through something called selective permeability. So the cell membrane allows the other substance to come and go out of the cell, such as water and nutrients. Now, what do we mean by selective permeability? It's a feature that allows substances to pass into and out of the cell according to the cell needs. So if the cell needs more water, selective permeability allows the cell to get water through the cell membrane. If it has an excess of water, it lets water out. It lets the waste material out, for example. Good. The second important organelle is the cytoplasm, which is the thick gelatinous liquid inside of the cell, and all other organelles float in the cytoplasm. Good. The next very, very, very important organelle, which is the mitochondria. The mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. What do we mean by that? It's the main source of energy for the cell. So that's why we call it the powerhouse, because it provides the cell with energy. That's its function. It provides the cell with the energy it needs. How? By converting sugar inside of the cell into energy. So when the cell gets sugar, the mitochondria converts this sugar into energy. And this process, the conversion of sugar into energy, we call it cellular respiration. So the cellular respiration, it's the process that takes place inside the mitochondria, where oxygen is used to obtain the chemical energy stored in food to help the cell make their functions. So this is the process by which food or sugar is converted into energy. By the help of oxygen, that's why we call it cellular respiration. Good. Another important organelle is the nucleus. And it has two main functions. First, the formation of proteins. Second, cell division, to form or to create new cells. Next, we have the endoplasmic reticulum. And it's one of the organelles of the cell. And it has a very important function, which is assembling or collecting and transportation of proteins inside the cell to build and repair the cell. Finally, we have Golgi apparatus, and it's also one organelle of the cell, and it helps do two things. It packs and transports different materials between cells and out of the cell. So now let's try and solve these questions. Cytoplasm controls the cell division to form new cells. Is that true or false? That's false. Which organelle does it then? It's the nucleus. Well, the cell organelles float in the cytoplasm. Is that true or false? Yes, the cytoplasm is a gelatinous, thick liquid in which all other organelles float. Now, let's do the same thing for the plant cell. The plant cell has the same organelles and the same structure of the animal cell, but it also has three more specific parts. The first is the cell wall, which exists only in the plant cell, and it's a wall made up of cellulose, which is a kind of sugar, as we said. And it's a rigid or hard external material that surrounds the cell, the plant cell. Why? To give the plant cell a definite shape. Well, something else which is the chloroplasts. The chloroplasts, which are these, are sac-like organelles. They're like small bags. And they are called granules, which give the plant its green color. Because it has something inside of it, which is called the chlorophyll. And the chlorophyll absorbs energy that comes from the sunlight, and it makes the food for the plant, which is the photosynthesis process. So through the light coming from the sun, the plant makes its own food through photosynthesis process by the help of the chlorophyll inside of the chloroplast. Finally, it has a sap vacuole, which is like a very large sac compared to the cell, of course. And its function is to store nutrients, water, and waste material. So it stores three things: nutrients, water, and waste material. A very important thing about the sap vacuole is that it exists only in the plant cell, but in the animal cell we have a similar organelle, which is not an organelle, but a similar thing, which are vacuoles. And they are small and multiple. So we have a few of them doing this function. Good. So now let's compare the two kinds of cells, the animal and the plant cell. They have 6 similar organelles or parts, which are the cell membrane, Golgi apparatus, nucleus, cytoplasm, endoplasmic reticulum, and mitochondria. The animal cell has vacuoles, but the plant cell has 3 things: the cell wall, chloroplast, and the sap vacuole, one big sap vacuole. Good. In this part, we imagine that a city is like a cell. So the city hall is like the nucleus, and the guards at the city gates are like the cell membrane, while the power station is like the mitochondria, because this is the main source of energy, and the construction workers are like the endoplasmic reticulum, moving things inside of the city, and the endoplasmic reticulum moves things inside of the cell. The post office is like Golgi apparatus, because it transfers things out of the city, out of the cell. And the storehouse is like the vacuoles. And if we have a stone wall surrounding the city, this is like a plant cell, this is like the cell wall. And the food factory is like the chloroplasts, because this is the main source of food, the photosynthesis process. Good. Okay. In lesson 6, we get to learn 3 more important information. One of the things you can do when you grow up is to become a cell biologist, which is the scientist that studies cells, of course. And they can study animal cell, helping doctors, or they can study the plant cell, helping in agriculture. And to see the cells in a very good way, we need more advanced microscopes, and we call these 3D microscopes. A 3D microscope is a very interesting invention, because it takes many pictures of the cell. Let's imagine a book. A book has many pages, right? So this is what the 3D microscopes does. It takes many pictures, many layers of the cell, and then adding them up together using a computer, you make a 3D image of the whole cell. You can see it from different angles. Good. But when you see the cells, some of them are colorless, clear, so you can't really see them. So this is what we do. We stain the cells, we give them color using a dye or a stain, and usually we do this using methylene blue to be able to see the cell. Good. So let's try and answer these questions. The device that allows scientists to see the top, side, and different layers of the cell, we call it methylene blue cell biologist or 3D microscope. Well, that's the 3D microscope. Next, we can use which dye to make the nucleus of the cell more visible. Of course, we use methylene blue. Finally, which scientists study cells? We call them the cell biologists. Good. So that was concept 1. Again, if you have any questions you need to ask, you can always ask your teacher or using the website. Next time we're going to discuss concept 2, inshallah, so see you next time.